Diajeng is in the second year of her PhD at the University of Bremen, where she's working with Veronica EERIE. And she's going to be telling us today about the first project that she's completed within her PhD, so data-driven equation discovery of sea ice albedo parametrization. Thanks, Diajeng.
Yeah, thank you, Hannah, for the nice introduction. Let's get started. Here you see a daily snapshot of surface albedo of sea ice pack. So sea ice pack is defined as grid sets where the sea ice concentration is above 80%. On the left-hand side, you see the sea ice albedo derived from satellite observations, and on the right-hand side, computed with the FESM parametrization. So FESM is the sea ice model developed at EERIE. And what you clearly see here is that the FESM parametrization does not capture the spatial variability of the observed albedo. And the reason for that is that in FESM, albedo is treated as a tuning parameter that depends on snow cover and surface temperature. Based on that, we formulated two research questions. So the first research question is, can we develop a physically consistent equation for albedo with machine learning based on observations, which performs better than the FESM parameterization? The second question is, what do we learn from our discovered data-driven equation? The current sea ice albedo parametrization in FESM follows Parkinson and Washington from 1979 in the following abbreviated with PW79, and it consists of 4 constant albedo values for different sea ice regimes. So first we look whether we have freezing or melting conditions, and then we look whether snow is present or not, and then we assign these constant albedo values accordingly. And we argue that this parametrization is too simple and we want to improve it. So the goal of our study is to find a physically consistent equation for sea ice albedo which balances error and complexity. And for that, we apply the following workflow. So first of all, we pre-process all the observational and reanalysis data, and then we train a simple feed-forward neural network on the processed data set. And based on the trained neural network, we perform sequential feature selection, which gives us a ranking of the most important input features. And with that, we aim to reduce the dimensionality of our data set. And there are 2 reasons why we want to do that. The first reason is that we seek parsimonious models, so models that perform well with as few input features as possible. And the second reason is that in the next step, we perform symbolic regression, which is an equation discovery method, so an interpretable machine learning method that works well on low-dimensional data. And for that, we use PySO, which is a Python library. And once we have found a set of physically consistent equations using PySO, we compare them with baseline models of various complexities on an error complexity plane. And we do that because we want to assess how increasing model complexity reduces the error. So our data set consists of 5 sea ice variables and 5 atmospheric variables from various satellite and reanalysis products. So the atmospheric variables are derived from ERA5, and the variables are also available on the whole Pan-Arctic region. And we use daily data from March until September, from 2013 until 2020. And we use the first 6 years for training and the last 2 years for validation for our machine learning pipeline. So after pre-processing our data, we perform simple hyperparameter tuning of a multi-layer perceptron neural network. And in the end, we got a neural network with 3 layers and 32 units each, a batch size of 32, a learning rate of 0.001. We used Adam optimizer and the mean squared error as loss function. And so basically, a very basic neural network. And as I've said before, the goal of sequential feature selection is to get the ranking of the most important input features to reduce the number of features to the ones that gives the most predictive performance while reducing model complexity. And yeah, how does sequential feature selection works? So first we begin by training the neural network with one feature and evaluate it by its performance based on the mean squared error on the validation set. So in the first iteration here, we do that for each 10 features because we have 10 features in our data set. So in the end, we have 10 neural networks. And the feature that leads to the lowest MSE can then be considered as the most informative one. So this is then our top input feature. So in the following iterations, additional features are then incorporated sequentially. So after each iteration, we get, or after the second iteration here, we get the second most informative feature, and so on and so forth. Yeah. So after performing sequential feature selection, we perform symbolic regression using Python. So symbolic regression is a type of regression that searches through a space of potential mathematical expressions of any form that best fits to our data set. So it's not restricted to linear functions or polynomials or exponentials. And there are two advantages of symbolic regression. So first, it's flexibility. So it can model complex relationships without pre-specifying the form of the function. And its interpretability. So it's comprehensive compared to black box models such as the neural network. And commonly, genetic programming is used for symbolic regression, which is an evolutionary algorithm. And here, equations are expressed as trees. So there are several genetic operations applied, for example, crossovers. So in this case, branches are switched, or mutation where one or more nodes are randomly changed. So after we generated some equations from using Python, we also want to check whether they are physically consistent. And for that, we formulated the following physical constraints, which are the following. So the sea ice albedo output should be between 0 and 1. Snow cover significantly increases sea ice albedo. Thicker ice has a higher albedo than thinner ice. Under melting conditions, sea ice albedo decreases significantly, which, for example, causes the formation of melt ponds. And last but not least, the function should be smooth over the entire domain. So let's take a look at some results. Here you see the ranking resulting from our sequential feature selection based on the neural network as an estimator. So as the most important input feature, we have snow thickness followed by surface temperature, sea ice thickness, 2-meter temperature, and the remaining variables. And this aligns well with previous studies. So let's take a look at the model complexity graph. So here we compare our Python equations with other baseline models of various complexities. So we included polynomials of degree 1 to 4 and the neural network. And this graph can be read as like from the right to the left, the models get more accurate, and from the top to the bottom, the models get simpler. And there is a lot going on in this plot. I'm going to highlight the most important things. So first of all, when you look at the neural networks here, so this is the neural network with 1 input feature, 2 input features, 3 input features, and so on, based on the sequential feature selection ranking. And what you see here is that by adding 1 feature, the model performance improves until you get to the 4th or the 5th feature. Then you don't see any significant model improvement. So you also see here that the full set neural network, so the network with all the 10 inputs here marked with a cross, it slightly overfits. And actually, yeah, I forgot the most important thing actually, that the current phasum parametrization performs quite worse compared to the other models that we have developed in this pipeline. So all other models are way outperform the current phasum parametrization. Yeah, and last but not least, what you also see here is that the Peiser equation, they lie around here, which means that they excel in balancing model error and complexity. And the best equation also outperforms the current phasum parametrization by reducing the MSE by about a half. Now let's take a look at the best equation. So here you see the best Peiser equation. It includes the top 4 input features, which are snow thickness, sea ice thickness, 2-meter temperature, and surface temperature. And it consists of 7 coefficients, which are the weights of each input feature. C and D control the lower and the upper limit of the albedo value, and G controls the transition between melting and freezing conditions. And these are the values that are optimized on the whole data set. So this Peiser equation encapsulates 2 key mechanisms. The first one is the high sensitivity to small variations in thin snow. So in this plot, you see how varying snow and sea ice thickness affects the albedo when fixing the other features to its mean value during the validation period. And what you clearly see here is that the first 15 to 20 centimeters of snow are the most critical ones. So here you see a great increase of albedo, whereas for sea ice thickness, you marginally see any effects. And the second mechanism is that the weighted temperature difference between 2-meter and surface serves as a seasonal proxy. So this diagram shows not only the weighted temperature difference, but also the unweighted temperature difference. Here we only want to show like that the weights here uncover the seasonal behavior of the temperature difference. Okay, now let's take a look at the spatial maps. So the first 2 here you already saw from the introduction. And what you see here is that the Peiser equation better captures the observed spatial variability of the albedo as it reduced the MSE by about a half. Here you see the seasonal cycle of albedo. So you see that our best performing equation, which is here in blue, captures the seasonal cycle, the observed seasonal cycle quite well, whereas for the phasum, the untuned phasum parametrization, it barely shows any seasonality, and we think, or we hypothesize that it could be that that the modeled melting conditions in phasum, they might differ from the observed melting conditions. So this is just a hypothesis. And when we tune the phasum parametrization to our training, to our data set, then it exhibits seasonality, but still the magnitudes deviate from the observed one. And you also see a faster increase in albedo during the freeze-up season compared to the ground truth. What you can also do with the equation is to perform seasonal and regional analysis. So, for example, here we show the Barents Sea as an example. So you could take data from the Barents Sea and optimize the coefficients on this subset, and that gives us a significant improvement of the model performance. As you can see here, it reduces the MSE by about a half again. And since it is an equation that we can directly interpret, we get an insight what exactly improves the model performance. So for example, when we look at the weights of snow thickness and sea ice thickness, you see that for snow, in the Barents Sea, it has a way lower weight compared to the whole Pan-Arctic. And the reason for that is that simply in the Barents Sea, we don't have any snow. And for the sea ice thickness, the weight here is way higher compared to the whole Pan-Arctic. And here the reason is that we have a higher variability in thin sea ice in the Barents Sea, since in summer the Barents Sea is ice-free. Okay, now let's get to the conclusions. So using symbolic regression combined with physical constraints, we discover an interpretable, physically consistent equation for sea ice albedo using Pan-Arctic satellite and reanalysis data from 2013 until 2020. Our discovered equation outperforms the current Phase parametrization with respect to mean squared error by about 50%, while excelling in balancing error and complexity. And as opposed to neural networks, our discovered equation allows for further seasonal and regional analysis by fine-tuning the coefficients to subsets, giving insights into the underlying physics. And what do we learn from our discovered equation? So high sensitivity to small variations in thin snow and the weighted difference between the temperatures influenced sea ice albedo. Yeah, so thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Diajeng. So we've got a couple of minutes for questions. Have we got any questions? You can raise your hand or write in the chat if you prefer. While everyone is thinking, I can ask, have you implemented this parametrization already in a model and seen?
Yes, so I'm working closely with Dimitri, and he already implemented this parametrization, and he did a 20 years test run. And so it's running stable. And we see that in the Arctic, it produces less sea ice during the summer, but we haven't tuned it yet. So yeah.
And when you say you haven't tuned it, in what way do you anticipate tuning it?
So in terms of these coefficients, okay. So we haven't tweaked any coefficients. Yeah. So we really use the standard configuration and just replaced the current parametrization with this equation.
Yep.
Yes.
Great. That's already an achievement. Yes. Any questions? I can carry on asking questions.
Yeah, I mean, you can see when you with the people there are some hands up.
I can't see that.
Just if you have the participants list, you might
I can see.
see.
Fantastic. Yes, great.
Yeah, just from my side, very nice and clear presentation, I have to say. And sort of my question relates probably to this, what you have said before, sort of what's next, right? I mean, it's very convincing. So what's next on your list?
Yeah, so I'm still discussing with Dimitri about this. So, I mean, the goal is, of course, that that this parametrization somehow improves the current Phase model, and that it also uncovers maybe some model errors in terms of the thermodynamics. And also we could compare this configuration maybe to more complex configurations. For example, the Phasor coupled to ice pack, for example. Yeah.
So with that, we virtually thank you again, Diajeng. Thank you very much. And I will move on to our next speaker, Simon.
Can you hear me?
Yes, right. And while you're
Yes.
finding your slides, I can introduce you. So Simon Michel is a postdoc working with myself and Christian Stroman in Oxford. And today he's going to tell us about analysing the role of mesoscale eddies with machine learning. Take it away, Simon.
Okay, thank you very much, Hannah. So yeah, the title is a bit, large, I mean global, but because I'm presenting two different things today, because it's like two preliminary results, I would say. So the first one is like an analysis of, for the moment, only high-res simulations, historical simulations where we analyze the effect of the resolution on the simulated fingerprints of climate modes. And the second one, I present some first analysis of the IMS AMIP simulations, because so it's very recent, but I found something quite interesting, so I wanted to show it here. So in both cases, like for the first one, it's not ready yet because we want to add EERIE simulations, and this one we just started with IFS simulations actually. So for the fingerprints, climate modes such as, for instance, the North Atlantic Oscillation, ENSO, or Southern Annular mode, they have major impacts at different timescales depending on the modes. So it can be in terms of precipitation, temperatures, etc. And there are several of them. And there have been some studies that showed that climate models often struggle to simulate those modes. So here on the left, you have a figure for which so on the top, that's NAO against temperatures, and then you have an ENSO against precipitation here, and tropical North Atlantic against SSTs, and you have the model mean on the left, ERA5 on the middle, and the differences on the right. And you can see that there are some notable differences between models and between the observations. So we were wondering whether we could propose some machine learning to make a global assessment on how models simulate the fingerprints, the weather impacts of the modes. So for this, we proposed the following workflow. So the idea is that we take, so for the moment, only high-res MIP. We will add the EERIE simulations after. So we have all these models from high-res MIP on the left. So the red ones are the eddying ones. So only eddy permitting compared to EERIE, where that is eddy rich, so 25 kilometers in the ocean. And you have the not eddying ones in blue. You have the number of simulations in parentheses. And so the idea is that for each, so we take 6 different modes. So it's NINO 3.4, NAO, subpolar North Atlantic, tropical North Atlantic Oscillation, and Indian Ocean Dipole. And we look at the fingerprints of those modes on 3 variables, so precipitation, temperatures, and sea surface temperature. And so the idea is that we will make an evaluation for each possible pair of mode and variables. So for instance, IOD and the IOD impacts on precipitation. And so we'll make one convolutional network for this particular pair. And for this, so to produce a sample for training, we compute regression maps on 30, so climatological scale, so 31-year sliding window for all the possible simulations we have on the left. And we use an increment of 3 years, so that makes 12 regression maps per simulations with 48 simulations. So this is the whole sample. And the idea is that we will train a convolutional network, so that is designed for image analysis, to look at the fingerprints of the modes and to tell whether the models is eddying or not eddying, or has a high or low resolution atmosphere. So for the moment, we have in the first place, we have done it only for the resolution of the ocean. So the idea is that you exclude all the simulations of a model, you train a convolutional network to scan climate mode's fingerprint and tell the resolution of the model that generated it. So for the ocean here. So here, that's an example for IOD. So the red box plot is the probability of eddying models to be predicted as eddying models. And for the blue, it's not eddying models to be predicted as not eddying models. So you want both of them to be close to 1. So in this case, we can see that eddy permitting models are better predicted as being eddy permitting models. And actually, this is true almost everywhere, notably for fingerprints of precipitation and temperature. For SSTs, it's of course always true, but this is expected. But this is kind of significant across the modes and across the different also variables. And what this means is that in the training sample, you have editing models that are producing fingerprints that are similar each other enough to be easily detectable by the CNN. So it means that they are converging into more similar climate fingerprints, climate impacts of the modes. This is what this means. And so we have done the same analysis here. So purple is not for eddying and not eddying, but for low and high resolution atmospheric models. But so low resolution is just 250 and 100 kilometers, and high resolution, so the yellow ones are 50 and 25 kilometers. So for some cases, we do see the same result than for the ocean, but actually it's really not as clear. So we assume that the ocean has a stronger effect here. And actually, we have made a second experiment afterwards. So now we retrain with all the models. So for all possible pairs of mode and variables as well. And we want to predict the resolution of ERA 5. So of course, ERA 5, so it's like reanalysis data, so considered as observations. So of course, it has no resolution, but you want observations to be classified as something high resolution, which would mean that it is closer, more similar to what high resolution models simulate. So this is what we have done here. So here the box plot gives you the probability of ERA 5 regression maps to be classified as eddying model. So for a lot of modes and variable pairs, you can see that it is nicely clustered as an eddying model. So this really means that eddying models simulate more similar fingerprints to observations than low resolution models. This is exactly what it means. So of course, there are some pairs where this is not true, but for most cases, we are significantly higher than 0.5. And then when we do that for the atmosphere as well, so here, this is the probability not of being eddy permitting, but of being high resolution, but for the atmosphere. There are some cases where this is true. We can see here, for instance, for IOD and SEM on precipitation and temperatures. But for most cases, this is not true compared to what we found for the ocean. So again, this is very preliminary, but what we see here is that there is a convergence. So models with eddying ocean are simulating fingerprints that are that are like more similar each other than what low resolution models do. And on top of that, they also simulate fingerprints that are more similar to what observations say. And we think that the analysis we do here, what's nice is that we don't have to focus on like a single mode or a single variable or something. We really make a global assessment within a single and scalable framework. So this is it for this first part. And for the second part, so this is very preliminary as well. So I've been using this nice data from AMI-like simulations from IFS, so with the TCO 399 setup. So this is a setup where you have 25 kilometers in the atmosphere, and this is forced either by observed SSTs for the period 1980 to 2023, or by the filtered SST fields instead. So you remove the ocean mesoscale that forces the atmosphere. That's the difference. So you can definitely, so this is like a mean differences between 5 simulations, the mean of the 5 simulations for both experiments, so filtered eddies and forced SST runs. And you can see here that there are differences in mean climate. So when it is stippled, it means that it is significant at the 90% confidence level. So there are differences in mean climate. So that tells you that the ocean mesoscale have an impact on the mean climate, but it doesn't tell you where it does have an impact immediately. I mean, it just tells you globally, if you average all the climate, it gives you that at the end. But so what we see here is some kind of a mix of the immediate effects of eddies on climate, on climate variability, and the results of how climate was simulated due to the improvement of remote responses of the presence of eddies, such as improved blocking or, for instance, improved ENSO and stuff like that. So here we want to use some explainable AI to actually see the direct fingerprint of the eddies, not only the result of the eddies on those variables. So for this, we have 5 simulations for each of the experiments for IFS. So I've called them HIST for normal SST forced AMI-like simulations, and filtered for those forced by filtered SST fields. in the training set, we use 4 simulations of each of the experiments, and we leave one of each for the testing set. So all the results I'm gonna be showing at the end is for the testing set, and we use a convolutional network that is just trained to tell whether a given monthly snapshot of temperature or heat flux or precipitation was simulated with the HEAST or field experiment. That's about it. But what's interesting afterwards is that we will use some explainable AI. So the idea is you backpropagate the scores of your, so basically you have a score and you make some small modification in your network and see how it impacts the score. Basically, that's the idea of explainable AI. And here, the idea of this technique is that it's pixel-wise. So it basically starts from a black image and it makes an interpolation between the actual image, so the climate anomaly map, and a black image. And you you slightly go from black to real image with a small increment of your interpolation level. And you see, you can then integrate the differences in the gradient. So the backpropagation I was talking about, like small differences that make differences in your output score. And so this is what will tell you like what pixel is actually important for the classification. So this is an example with a cat. So it here shows you exactly pixels that are on the face of the cat, on the body of the cat, etc. So first, we look at the classification. So for 3 of the 4 variables, so we have latent and sensible heat fluxes plus surface temperatures and precipitation here. So only for precipitation, we have some level of misclassification, but for all other cases, we have perfect classifications. And here, even if there are some misclassification, it still means that there is an immediate impact of temperature from the presence of eddies, because you still have higher classifications for true classifications here on the diagonal. And so this is what we obtain in terms of explainable AI. So it directly extracts changes due to eddies immediately and not remotely. And you can see that you have these very nice signals, for instance, in western boundary current regions, for instance, the Perocio or the Gulf Stream here, also the Brazilian current and the Agudas. And we also see that for the sensible heat flux, so that like, of course, confirms that you have like improved RCE interactions in those areas. And we also find like nice precipitation signals in those areas. So I'm not sure, I have not tried to explain to see why exactly, but probably some of you know that. And also for latent fluxes, we found like things that make sense, for instance, like strong signals in the tropics, tropical basins, for instance. So again, this is very preliminary, but I think this is a nice way to extract the fingerprints of eddies, like immediate fingerprints of eddies. And actually it runs very fast, like because I've been using monthly data here, so you can run it like in 2 hours on the local computer and get those maps with 5 simulations interpolated on 1x1 grids. And that's about it for my presentation. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you, Simon. So questions, Simon? Malcolm has a question.
Hi, Simon, very nice.
Hi.
A question on the first part. So you detected more difference from the ocean side than the atmosphere side in terms of resolution.
Yes.
This will reveal my ignorance of exactly how this works. Could that be because if you're looking at modes of variability, they tend to have a longer time scale, and the ocean tends to have the memory of the climate system, whereas the atmosphere has a shorter memory? Could that play a role in that, or is that not the case?
So that's a very good point. This is not the assumption we have made, but actually that could be true. In our case, we were just thinking that you might want to increase the atmosphere even further, because here in high-res MIP for the moment, it goes up to 25 kilometers in the atmosphere. So that's not that high, and you don't resolve processes like atmospheric convection and stuff like that. So we think that you kind of cross a step when you resolve the eddies, when you explicitly simulate the eddies. But when you increase the atmospheric resolution up to 25 kilometers, you didn't really cross a step necessarily. So this is the assumption we were making. But you might be also right with the the frequency of the ocean. That is yeah,
Great.
you're right.
Thanks.
Thank you. More questions? Yeah, I have one I can ask. With the precipitation results, where you saw that there was actually, this is late in the second half of your talk, the precipitation results, you showed quite some confusion of the network here. Yeah, so it was less good at telling which cases were filtered and which were using true SSTs.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah. Is it possible to then, using your XAI maps, is it possible to create maps of separated according to this grid? So separated into cases where it's correctly assigned, for example, and ones where it got it wrong, and see if there's a difference in.
That's definitely like what I have in mind, but I haven't done it yet. But yeah, this is what I have in mind. Like looking, you can even make a composite of XA values and see where it's different actually.
Great. Any more questions? Thomas, put your hand up.
Yeah, thank you very much also from my side. Very, very nice presentations today. I don't know whether it's perhaps a bit premature, but if you go back to your impact plots, the impact of eddies, I mean, what you see, it's very localized, and I understand it's really sort of the direct impact of the eddies. But we do have this question of, what's the impact of eddies, say, on Europe? I'm sort of wondering whether you could catch that, but I think you could, right? If these sort of small scale eddies would have an impact on the larger scale flow, that's something you should capture here, right? Because again, I think it addresses a little bit some of the questions we set out to answer, but except perhaps for a few regions in terms of turbulent heat fluxes over parts of Africa, I mean, the continents are void of any signal, right? And sort of, I'm wondering what this is telling us,
Yeah, of course. So for impacts like what you said, I think I should make something more localized, like because here when I use the whole cloud, there are some areas like those ones that are like highlighted here that are so obvious that the network will mostly look at those and don't try to make any effort to look at other areas. So you should like for instance do the same analysis but focusing on Europe to find some other types of signals, I would say. But like here, it's really about like again like the I call it like an instantaneous fingerprint. So that's basically, for instance, like showing you signals of temperatures and heat sensible heat fluxes in the Gulf Stream. And there are some studies that have showed that those heat fluxes in the Gulf Stream that are better simulated due to better resolved vertical SST gradients have an impact on Europe through a better representation of blocking, for instance. So and here we just like can like relate it with that. And what I think is nice here is that we don't have to for this kind of hypothesis, for instance, the impact of RC interaction in Gulf Stream, for the impact of that on European blocking, you can sort of like confirm that, and with this kind of map, because you just see directly, and you don't have to focus on a specific region and to make a complex process understanding analysis or etc. You have everything popping up like just like that. I think it was a nice like more methodologically nice rather than completely useful, because of course for process understanding it's not incredible, but again, like that's very preliminary, so I have to think about how to push that forward, of course.
Thank you.
That's great. I've got time for one final question, if it was there. I'm not seeing any hands, so I think with that we'll say thank you very much again to Simon and to all of those who shared today. And I will take this opportunity to remind you that we have got another Storms, Eddies and Science seminar in only 3 weeks' time on Monday the 7th of July. And this is going to be hosted by Work Package 5 from EERIE. It's going to feature project scientists Stella Birgina and Steffi Libera talking about mesoscale eddies and EERIE models, a summary of the key project deliverable D5.1. So please come back on Monday the 7th of July, same time, to hear that. With that, we say thank you very much. I'll see you again soon.